My name is Lila Morrison, 28 years old. If you'd met me 3 years ago, you might have said I was lucky. I had a loving husband, a stable career, a small apartment filled with warmth and laughter. Back then, I truly believed love was enough, that if two people cared deeply, they could survive anything. I was wrong. Love isn't armor. It's glass. It shines until the first crack appears. I met Mark Morrison, my husband, 6 years ago at a charity event our firms co-sponsored. He was charming in that disarming way that makes you feel seen. We shared the same dry humor, the same quiet ambition, and I remember thinking, this is it. For years it was, until I met his mother. The first dinner with Evelyn Morrison felt like an audition I hadn't prepared for. She greeted me with a smile, too sharp to be genuine, her perfume thick and calculated. The meal was pleasant on the surface. She'd laugh mid-sentence and slip in comments that left me unsure if I'd been complimented or insulted. "So, Lila," she asked sweetly, "do you actually work in finance, or is that one of those remote hobbies people call jobs now?" Mark laughed, brushing it off. I tried to, too. When dessert came, she tilted her head. "You have such a lovely face. If you dropped a few pounds, you'd be breathtaking." I felt my fork pause midair. Mark just sighed. "Mom, please." "Oh, relax," she said. "It's a joke." That night I smiled through gritted teeth. When we left, I asked Mark if she always acted like that. He kissed my hand and said, "She's just protective. She'll come around." She didn't. Over the next few years, Evelyn's approval became a game I never signed up for. Her calls always started with pleasantries and ended with critiques, my clothes, my makeup, my supposed lack of class. She'd invite herself into our plans, always reminding me that she knew Mark best. When he proposed to me, I was so lost in joy that I forgot the warnings in my gut. I said yes, under a sky full of fairy lights, believing it was the start of our forever. We decided to announce it to his parents over dinner at a restaurant downtown. Evelyn smiled when she saw the ring, but her eyes were dark. "How much did that cost, Mark?" she asked. He hesitated. "Enough." She leaned back, lips tightening. "She doesn't deserve a ring that expensive. You've never even bought me jewelry that nice. Some gratitude for your mother would be nice before you hand it all to a stranger." Her husband Thomas muttered something about decorum, but she waved him off. "I'm just saying." She continued staring at me, 3 years together, "and this is your choice. You could have had anyone, Mark." The table went silent. People from nearby glanced over. I felt my chest tighten. Mark stood up abruptly, tossing his napkin on the table. "Enough, Mom. We're leaving." That night he apologized over and over, insisting she was just emotional. But as I watched the city lights flicker through our car window, all I could hear was her voice. "You could have had anyone, Mark." The next few months should have been about planning a wedding, but every decision turned into a battlefield. Evelyn wanted to pick the guest list, the dress designer, even the color of the napkins. She'd call vendors behind my back, cancel appointments, and tell Mark she was saving him from my poor taste. He defended me, but each argument left a mark. Slowly I began to sense how deep her influence ran. Our wedding day came beautiful on the surface, chaotic underneath. Evelyn arrived in a white dress. When I saw her at the entrance, my throat went dry. Mark whispered something to her, and after a tense exchange, she changed. But by then, the damage was done. Every photo from that day feels haunted by her presence. Still, I clung to the good. Mark's smile, our vows, the hope that things would finally calm down once we were married. For a while it did. Our first year of marriage felt like breathing again. Quiet mornings shared, coffee laughter over burnt toast. I almost forgot how much Evelyn had interfered. But peace, I would learn, never lasts long in her world. One evening, as we sat watching TV, Mark mentioned wanting to visit his parents that weekend. I hesitated. "Do you think your mom's still upset about the wedding?" He chuckled softly. "She'll always be upset about something. Just ignore her." I smiled faintly, unaware that her next obsession was already forming. When I found out I was pregnant at the end of that year, I was terrified and overjoyed. We decided to surprise his parents with the news. I crafted a small basket champagne chocolates and a tiny wooden plaque that said Grandma. At dinner, Evelyn unwrapped it slowly. The moment she realized what it meant, she froze. "You're pregnant?" she asked flatly. I nodded. "Yes." A long silence followed. Then her lips curled into a smile. "Well, congratulations. I just hope it's Mark's." The air left my lungs. Mark's fork hit the table. "Mom." She waved her hand, laughing. "I'm kidding. Honestly, can't you two take a joke?" But the joke lingered like smoke you can't clear. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to shake off her words, but deep down, something shifted. For the first time, I realized Evelyn wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous, and I was carrying a child she didn't want to exist. At first, I tried to convince myself that Evelyn's words were just her way of masking insecurity, a woman afraid of losing her son. But as the weeks turned into months, her jokes turned into poison. Every visit felt like walking into an interrogation room. She'd circle me with smiles that never reached her eyes, pressing her hand to my belly like it was a fragile object she could still claim ownership of. "You've really put on a few pounds, haven't you?" she'd say in that sing-song tone. "Be careful, darling. Men like Mark, well, they notice these things." Mark would sigh, mutter a half-hearted, "Mom, please," then go back to scrolling through his phone. And I'd sit there swallowing my anger, wondering when exactly he stopped defending me. It was around my 4th month when I realized he'd begun visiting her more often. Saturday mornings, when I'd wake up nauseous and too weak to move, he'd already be gone. Just helping Mom with errands, he'd text. Sometimes he wouldn't even bother explaining. I told myself he was trying to keep the peace. But peace doesn't mean absence. It means effort. And his effort was gone. One night, after he came home late, I decided to speak up. "Lila, why do you have to see her every weekend, Mark?" "She's my mother, Lila. She's lonely. Lila. She's manipulative. That's not loneliness. Mark, God, you always twist things. Maybe you're just hormonal." That word hormonal stung more than any insult his mother had thrown. It was the dismissal, the erasure of my sanity. I went silent. He didn't notice. Evelyn's influence seeped deeper into our lives in small, insidious ways. She'd show up unannounced with healthy meals and proceed to lecture me about proper motherly nutrition. She'd clean our kitchen, rearrange things, and say, "Oh dear, I'm just helping. You're too tired to keep things perfect now." Each act of help was really a reminder. You don't belong here. This is my son's home, not yours. Sometimes she'd bring up Lauren Hayes, Mark's ex-girlfriend, the fit and elegant girl who apparently could run a marathon without losing her breath. Evelyn always added, "You know Lauren still asks about Mark sometimes. She never really moved on." I'd smile politely, pretending it didn't bother me. But that night, I'd find Mark scrolling through old photos on his phone of him and Lauren in their 20s, carefree and glowing. When I asked him why he kept them, he shrugged. "They're just memories. Don't overthink." But I did. How could I not when my reflection felt like a stranger's swollen, tired, and unloved? Months passed. My pregnancy grew heavier, and so did the silence in our home. Mark's laughter, once bright and grounding, had turned into a hollow echo. He stopped kissing me goodbye. He stopped asking about baby names. When I cried one night, overwhelmed by the loneliness, he looked at me like I was an inconvenience. And through it all, Evelyn's voice hovered over me like static. At a family dinner one evening, she made a new joke. "You know, there was this woman I knew once lied about her baby's father. Poor man raised another man's child for years." Thomas cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Evelyn, that's enough." She laughed. "Relax, Tom. I'm just talking. Lila's not the type to lie, are you, dear?" Mark said nothing. He didn't even look up. The next morning, I tried again to reach him. "Lila, why won't you stand up for me, Mark?" "Because it's exhausting, Lila. You two are always at each other's throats. I can't keep doing this. Lila, she's attacking me, not the other way around." "Mark, she's just worried. Maybe if you tried being nicer, Lila, nicer, I'm the one she's humiliating." He stood up abruptly and walked away. I heard the front door close, the sound of the car engine fading down the street. I sat there alone again, one hand on my stomach, whispering to my unborn son that everything would be okay, even though I was no longer sure. 2 weeks later, Mark suggested I move in with his parents for support. The irony burned. I refused, saying I'd rather sleep on the floor of our apartment than under her roof. He looked hurt, like I'd just rejected his love. He didn't understand that what I was rejecting was her control. The final straw came on a Sunday afternoon. Evelyn showed up, without warning, holding a casserole and her phone. "Smile, dear," she said, snapping a photo of me in my oversized pajamas, hair undone, for the family group chat. We'll call it Mark's Tired Little Housewife. I stood frozen. My hands shook as I whispered, "Please leave." She didn't move. "Evelyn, you really should be more grateful. I've raised better women than this." That was the first time I shouted, "Get out!" She flinched but smirked, whispering as she walked past me, "The truth always comes out, Lila." The door slammed. My pulse roared in my ears. When Mark came home later, I told him what happened. He didn't even look surprised. "She's upset," he said quietly. You shouldn't yell at her. That night, as I lay awake in the dark, I realized something terrifying. Evelyn wasn't just trying to hurt me, she was trying to erase me. And Mark was letting her. By the 8th month, I stopped waiting for Mark to come home on time. I stopped expecting him to touch my belly or talk to our baby like he used to. Every evening, I'd sit on the couch with my swollen feet counting the hours since his last text, wondering how love could fade so quietly you almost miss its death. When labor came, it was violent and early. I remember gripping the side of the hospital bed, the fluorescent lights burning above me, sweat soaking through my gown. I wanted Mark there holding my hand. Instead, he was outside arguing with someone on the phone. When he finally walked in, his expression was already carved from stone. Evelyn followed perfume thick enough to choke me. Lila, I don't want her here. Mark, don't start. She's your family too. Lila. Not now, Mark. Please, Evelyn. You'll thank me later, dear. I screamed not just from the contraction, but from the feeling that my body no longer belonged to me, that my life was no longer mine. When my son arrived, time froze. The room blurred, the pain, the lights, the chaos, and all I saw was him. Tiny, fragile, perfect. I cried because even in the storm there was beauty. But before I could even hold him properly, Mark spoke. Mark, I want a paternity test. At first I laughed, certain I'd misheard. But when I looked up, his face was unreadable. Evelyn's, however, was almost triumphant. Lila. What did you just say, Mark? You heard me. I need to be sure. Lila. Sure of what, Evelyn? Oh, come now. Don't make this dramatic. These things happen. It's better to be clear before he gets too attached. Her words sliced through me like glass. My hands trembled as I clutched the baby closer. Lila. You think I cheated on you? Well, I could barely walk some days, Mark. Just take the test. If you've got nothing to hide, it shouldn't matter. Something inside me broke then. The man I loved who once promised to protect me now looked at me like a stranger on trial. I agreed to the test because the truth was my last weapon. I had nothing to hide. The days that followed blurred together feedings, exhaustion, a silence so thick it felt physical. Mark didn't sleep in our room. He barely spoke. When I tried to talk about the baby, he'd nod absently, his eyes distant. The results arrived 2 weeks later. I remember the white envelope on the kitchen counter, the way the edges curled slightly from humidity. My hand shook as I opened it, hoping this nightmare would finally end. Result probability of paternity 0%. It felt like the floor gave way beneath me. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Mark didn't ask for an explanation. He just picked up his suitcase and said, Mark, Mom was right. And then he was gone. The sound of the door clicking shut was louder than any scream. I called him dozens of times. No answer. My messages went unread. I begged him to retake the test, told him there had to be a mistake, but my words disappeared into silence. Evelyn, however, didn't stay silent for long. 3 days after Mark left, she called. Evelyn, you really should stop embarrassing yourself, dear. He's moved back home where he belongs. Lila, you did something, didn't you, Evelyn? Oh, don't start with accusations. Science doesn't lie. Leela. Then explain how a faithful wife suddenly has a child that isn't her husband's. Evelyn. Maybe you should ask yourself that. She hung up, leaving me shaking my baby crying in the background. That night I sat in the nursery holding my son, whispering promises to him through tears. I don't care what they say. I know who you are, and I'll prove it. The days turned into weeks. The apartment grew colder. I stopped eating properly, stopped sleeping. Every time my phone buzzed, hope flared, then died. Finally, one morning, I opened social media to see a photo of Mark smiling beside his mother, captioned, Family always knows best. I almost dropped my phone. The betrayal wasn't just private anymore, it was public. A delilation that I'd been erased. When my coworker Katie Lewis came by a few days later, I could barely stand. The house was a mess, bottles scattered, dishes piled high. She took one look at me and said, You need help. I couldn't speak, so I showed her everything, the post, the messages, the test result. She hugged me while I cried into her shoulder, whispering, You're not crazy, Lila. Something's wrong here. We'll fix it. That night, she stayed to help me clean and cook. For the first time in weeks, I ate a full meal. My baby slept peacefully, as if sensing the storm outside had calmed, if only for a moment. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Something inside me had shifted. The woman who once begged for love was gone. In her place was someone who wanted truth, whatever it took. As I lay in bed that night, The last words Evelyn had said echoed in my head. Science doesn't lie. And yet I couldn't stop thinking people do. The next morning, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Hollow eyes, cracked lips, the faint outline of who I used to be. My son's cries echoed faintly from the next room, but this time, instead of tears, something else rose inside me, resolve. I was done being quiet, done letting them decide the truth. I called Mark again, no answer. His voicemail, once a comfort, now sounded sterile. Hey, it's Mark. Leave a message. I left one last message. Lila. If you won't talk to me, fine. But ask your mother what she did. Ask her Mark. Because you'll regret it when you finally hear the truth. Then I called Evelyn. Her tone when she picked up was syrupy sweet. Evelyn, Lila, dear. I was just thinking about you. How's the baby, Lila? You know exactly how he is. You made sure of it. Evelyn, oh, whatever do you mean? For a moment I hesitated. My throat tightened. But then I remembered the look on Mark's face when he said Mom was right. That was enough to harden me. Lila, you switched the DNA results, didn't you? There was silence, then the faintest chuckle. Evelyn, what an imagination you have. Lila, I'm recording this call. Evelyn, good. Then record the truth. Her tone shifted, no more pretense, no more sweetness. Evelyn, yes, I switched them. I made sure the lab submitted the right result. My nephew works there. Did you know that I had to protect my son from you? The air left my lungs. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles turned white. Lila, you ruined our lives. You ruined his trust. Why, Evelyn? Because you don't deserve him. Look at you, plain, emotional, needy. You think that's what Mark needs. He's special. He deserves someone better, someone like Lauren. My voice cracked. Lauren. Evelyn. Oh. Yes, she's been visiting. She's always been the perfect girl for him, fit, elegant, polite. Not whatever it is you are. Her words sliced through me, but behind the fury I caught something deeper, a confession born from obsession. Evelyn. You should be grateful, really. I did you a favor. You're not the kind of woman who thrives in marriage. You break things. You weigh people down. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I pressed record and whispered, "You're sick." She laughed, "And you're finished." Then she hung up. For a moment, I just stood there, phone pressed to my ear, long after the call ended, listening to the silence. I played back the recording. Her voice crackling through the speaker, calm, proud, monstrous. The baby started crying again, jolting me back to reality. I went to him, my tears falling silently as I held him close. "You have no idea how strong your mother's going to be," I whispered. That night, I sent the audio file to myself, to my lawyer friend from college, and finally to Mark. The message read, "You wanted proof. Here it is. Listen carefully, then look me in the eye and tell me who you believe." He didn't reply, not that night, not the next day. But on the third day, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Thomas Morrison, Mark's father, stood there. His face was drawn older somehow. He held his hat in both hands like a man about to confess something heavy. "Thomas, Lila, may I come in?" I hesitated but nodded. He sat quietly in the living room, glancing around at the toys, the photos, the untouched dinner on the table. Finally, he spoke. "Thomas, I know what Evelyn did." My heart skipped. "Lila, you do." Thomas Mark confronted her after hearing your message. She denied it, of course, but I saw the way she looked at him, the way she's always looked at anyone who gets too close to him. He sighed, eyes glistening. She's obsessed with keeping control. Always has been. When Mark was a child, she'd hide his friends' phone numbers because she didn't want him distracted. When he dated Lauren, she told her parents they weren't good enough. But when you came along, something in her snapped. She couldn't stand that he loved someone she couldn't manipulate. He paused, lowering his head. "Thomas, I'm sorry, Lila. I should have stopped her. I should have spoken up sooner." I felt my throat tighten. For the first time, someone had said out loud what I'd been screaming into silence. "Lila, it's too late for sorry. She destroyed my marriage. Thomas. Then let's make sure she doesn't destroy your future." He placed a small envelope on the table, a contact at the lab, someone who can verify what really happened. I didn't ask why he was helping me now. I just nodded, tears slipping down my face. As he stood to leave, he looked toward the nursery. "Thomas. He looks just like Mark did when he was that age. That's what convinced me, you know. I didn't need a test." When he left, the air in the room felt different, lighter. For the first time in months, I felt hope. That night, I sat in the dark, holding my baby and listening to his soft breaths. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window. I whispered, "You'll never grow up thinking lies are love, not while I'm your mother." Because now I had something Evelyn didn't proof and purpose, and I was going to use both. Mark showed up 2 days later. I heard the knock before sunrise, a hesitant, rhythmic tapping that didn't sound like a stranger's. My heart stopped. For a brief, foolish second, I thought maybe he'd come to apologize, to hold me, to tell me it was all some twisted misunderstanding. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. His face was gaunt eyes, bloodshot jaw, trembling like he'd forgotten how to speak. "Mark, can I come in?" I didn't answer. I simply turned and walked back to the kitchen, the baby monitor crackling softly behind me. He followed. He stood there in silence for a long time before finally saying, "Mark, why listen to the recording?" Just like that, the weight of his words collapsed the walls between us. Mark, why confronted her Lila. She didn't even deny it. She said she did it because she wanted to save me. Said she'd rather ruin my marriage than watch me throw my life away. Lila. And now you see what you threw away instead. He swallowed hard guilt etched in every line of his face. Mark, I didn't know what to believe anymore. She kept saying things that made sense at the time. That you were distant. That you didn't love me the same way. That you were using the pregnancy to trap me. I laughed bitter and broken. Lila, I was dying, trying to hold this marriage together. And you were listening to bedtime stories from your mother. He sat down at the table like his knees couldn't hold him anymore. Then the confession came slowly, painfully, like peeling back old wounds. Mark, she brought Lauren over a few times, said it would be good to catch up. I told myself it was innocent. Just dinner, just conversation. But one night after we argued, he stopped, his voice cracked. "Lila, say it. Mark, I kissed her. It didn't mean anything, but I didn't stop it either. And when you called that night, I ignored it." For a moment, the world went silent. Even the baby monitor seemed to hold its breath. "Lila, while I was home crying over a false test, you were out kissing your ex." "Mark, I thought you'd betrayed me first." I was angry, lost Lila. "You were a coward, Mark. You still are." He buried his face in his hands. I know. I don't deserve forgiveness." And for once I didn't argue, because he was right. Later that day, Thomas came by again. He looked at us sitting in that small kitchen, the wreckage of a marriage laid bare, and sighed. "Thomas, I told your mother I'm leaving her." Mark's head shot up. "You're what, Thomas? I should have done it years ago, but I thought I could protect you by staying. Turns out I just helped her destroy us all." He turned to me. "Lila, I've spoken to a lawyer on your behalf. The lab confirmed there was tampering. The chain of custody on the DNA samples was falsified by Evelyn's nephew. He's confessed. I didn't even feel triumph, just exhaustion. So it's official then, your mother's lies are the only real truth in this family." Mark flinched. "What are you going to do?" I looked at my baby monitor, the faint hum of his breathing. Then at Mark. "Lila, I'm filing for divorce." He blinked like he didn't understand the words. "What?" "Lila, you abandoned me when I needed you most. You doubted me, betrayed me, and let her control you like a puppet. I'll raise our son alone. He deserves better than this cycle." Mark's eyes brimmed with tears. "Please, Lila, don't do this. I'll cut her off. I swear I'll never let her near us again." I shook my head. "You already did. Every time you let her speak for you, you brought her into our marriage. You don't know how to exist without her." The silence that followed was suffocating. "Thomas, maybe she's right, son." Mark's shoulders crumpled. He covered his face again, sobbing quietly. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. Just a dull ache that love had died in front of me, and I'd watched it decay piece by piece. Over the next week, I gathered everything I needed. The recording, the verified lab report, screenshots of Evelyn's messages. My lawyer assured me the case was solid. Tampering with medical evidence was a serious crime. Evelyn could face charges. She called once more after finding out. "Evelyn, you think you've won, you little parasite? Mark will never forgive you for tearing this family apart." Lila. "I didn't tear it apart, Evelyn. You did. I'm just making sure it stays broken where it belongs." She screamed something before hanging up, but I didn't hear it. I was already smiling through my tears, my baby cooing softly in my arms. The divorce papers were drafted within days. Mark didn't fight them at first. Guilt can be a powerful silencer. But I knew it wouldn't last. I knew there'd come a moment where he'd realize the full cost of what he'd lost. And when that day came, I'd be ready, stronger, steadier, and unwilling to look back. Because Evelyn's kingdom had crumbled. But now I had to build my own. The morning I filed for divorce was strangely quiet. No thunderclaps, no cinematic rainfall, just the steady hum of city life outside my window. I dressed neatly, hair tied back, my son tucked safely in his carrier beside me. He gurgled softly as I signed the papers, his small hand gripping my thumb as if to remind me what I was fighting for. When I walked out of the courthouse, the air felt lighter. For the first time in months, I wasn't gasping for breath. Mark started calling every night after that. At first, I ignored him. But on the fourth night, curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. Mark. I can't sleep, Lila. I see your face every time I close my eyes. Please, can we talk, Lila? About what, Mark? The weather. Your mother's next plan, Mark, about us. About the baby. I miss you both. Lila. You miss control. That's what you miss. He went quiet for a long moment, then softer. Mark, I deserve that, but I'm trying. I told her to stay away from me. I blocked her number. I didn't answer. I just listened to his breathing slow and shaky, like a man trying to remember what it means to be human again. Mark, I'll prove it to you. I'll cut her out. I'll do whatever you need. Lila. Then start by signing the papers. That's the only thing I need. 2 weeks later, I got the confirmation. The divorce proceedings were officially in motion. My lawyer, a calm woman named Rachel Miles, smiled gently. You've done everything right, Lila. With the evidence we have, you'll get full custody. The court will likely restrict his mother from having any contact. Hearing it said aloud felt unreal. Freedom printed in legal ink. Still, part of me grieved. Not for Mark, but for the life I thought we'd build. I spent that evening cleaning the apartment, deleting old photos, and packing up the things that still smelled like him. Every shirt folded felt like a small funeral. When I was done, I stood in the empty bedroom holding my son, whispering, "We're starting over." A week later, Evelyn's name appeared on the news feed of a local article lab technician, fired after evidence tampering scandal. It was brief, factual, and cold, just like her. I didn't need to read further. Her perfect world was collapsing. That same day, Thomas called. His voice was steady, almost peaceful. Thomas, I've left her. I couldn't live with that kind of cruelty anymore. I wanted you to know. Lila. I'm sorry it had to come to this. Thomas, don't be. Maybe it's the only way she'll ever face herself. Before hanging up, he said something that lingered. Thomas, when you rebuild Lila, make sure there's no room for ghosts. Meanwhile, Mark began showing up unannounced. Once he left a stuffed bear on the doorstep. Another time, a note that read, "Please let me see him." Part of me wanted to let him in, if only for our son's sake. But I couldn't forget the image of him standing in that hospital room questioning my child's blood before even holding him. When I finally agreed to meet, it was at a public cafe. He arrived wearing the same cologne I once loved. But it didn't smell like comfort anymore. It smelled like history. Mark, you look good. Lila, I look free. He smiled sadly. I deserve that. He showed me a photo on his phone, a therapist's office card. I'm getting help. For the codependence. For everything she did to me. And everything I let her do to you. His honesty startled me. But truth doesn't erase damage. Lila, I hope you heal Mark. For his sake. But I can't be the one waiting while you learn how to be a man. He nodded, tears brimming. Can I at least see him once a week? Lila, if the court approves. No surprises, no drop-ins. My son deserves stability, not confusion. He didn't argue, just whispered, "You really are stronger than I ever knew." Lila, I had to be. You gave me no choice. The custody hearing was brief but decisive. The judge, after hearing the recordings and reviewing the falsified DNA report, granted me primary custody with supervised visitation for Mark. Evelyn was banned from any contact entirely. Rachel squeezed my shoulder as the gavel came down. Congratulations, Lila. You did it. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful, like the end of a storm. That night, I took my son to the park for the first time since everything began. The air smelled like rain and lilacs. He giggled as the wind lifted his tiny curls, and for a moment the noise of the world faded. I realized then I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. And maybe freedom doesn't come in grand gestures or court rulings. Maybe it's quieter than that, like a mother's heartbeat sinking with her child steady and sure. As the sun dipped below the skyline, I whispered, "It's just us now, baby, and that's enough." Because Evelyn had taken my peace, Mark had taken my trust, but neither of them could take my strength. Not anymore. A full year passed. The seasons changed without ceremony, summer to autumn, autumn to snow. Each one carried its own small healing. I no longer woke up dreading the sound of my phone. The silence that used to ache now felt like safety, My apartment was smaller, humbler, but it was ours, mine, and my son's. The walls were lined with laughter instead of arguments. Every morning I'd watch him toddle toward the window, pressing his tiny hand against the glass as sunlight spilled across the floor. He'd point at birds giggling, and in those moments the world didn't feel cruel anymore. I'd rebuilt quietly, joined a neighborhood book club, started writing again, small essays, reflections, letters I'd never send. One of them began, "Healing is not about forgetting what broke you. It's about remembering who you were before you shattered." That became my mantra. Mark's supervised visits began in the spring. The first time he saw our son again, he cried before even holding him. He looked thinner, calmer, like someone who'd finally learned the cost of silence. "Mark, he's grown so much. I missed everything." Lila. "You missed what you chose to ignore." He nodded, no excuses left. There was a gentleness in his eyes now, but it wasn't love, not anymore. It was regret, wearing peace as disguise. We never spoke of Evelyn. I didn't ask, and he didn't offer. But word reached me through Thomas that she'd moved out of state alone, her name whispered in the same breath as disgraced. Thomas visited once, bringing a small wooden rocking horse for his grandson. He stayed long enough to sip tea and watch us laugh. Before leaving, he placed his hand on my shoulder. "Thomas, you did what none of us could, Lila. You ended her power." I smiled faintly. I didn't end her. I just stopped letting her win. At night, when the apartment grew still, I sometimes found myself thinking back about how love can turn toxic when left unguarded, about how devotion can disguise control. Evelyn's face would flicker through memory, sharp as glass, then fade into the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I wasn't angry anymore, just wiser. Some pain doesn't need vengeance. It just needs distance. One Saturday evening, I took my son to the beach. The sky was the color of bruised gold waves, whispering secrets against the shore. He ran ahead, squealing as the water lapped at his feet. Mark happened to be there too. He'd arrived early for his visitation, waiting by the boardwalk, hands in his pockets. We exchanged a nod, civil quiet. He crouched to help our son build a small sandcastle, laughter bubbling from both of them. Watching from a distance, I realized something unexpected. I didn't hate him anymore. He looked up at me, once a question in his eyes. I smiled, a small, forgiving curve of lips. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he walked over. "Mark. He loves the water. You should see how happy he gets." Lila. I saw, Mark. "I'll never stop trying to make it right, you know." Leela. "You don't have to make it right. Just don't make it worse." He nodded, accepting that as all the forgiveness I could offer. We stood there for a while, silent, except for the waves. Then he turned and left, and I watched my son chase the tide free and fearless. That night, after tucking him into bed, I sat by the window, pen in hand, and wrote one final letter I'd never send. "Dear Mark, I forgive you, but I will never forget. Not because I want to remember the pain, but because forgetting would mean erasing the woman I became after surviving it. Evelyn once told me I'd never be good enough for you. She was right. In one way, I was too good for the version of you she built. But thank you, both of you, for showing me that love without respect is just dependence wearing perfume. Our son will grow up knowing that strength doesn't mean cruelty, and family doesn't mean control. He'll learn that peace is something you build, not beg for, and that will be my victory." I folded the letter, placed it in a box with the old wedding photos, and locked it away. Months later, Thomas visited again. Evelyn had filed for divorce. Her empire of manipulation was finally gone. He said she still talked about Mark like he was 10 years old, still waiting for him to call. I didn't feel pity, just closure. "Thomas, she'll never change, you know." Lila. "That's all right, I did." The night after he left, I rocked my son to sleep. His breathing evened out, small fingers curled around mine. Outside, rain tapped against the window, the same rhythm it had the night I first learned the truth. But now it didn't sound like grief. It sounded like renewal. I looked down at him and whispered, "You'll grow up free, my love. You'll never mistake control for care." Then I smiled to myself, feeling the warmth of a peace I'd fought too hard to lose again. Because maybe endings aren't punishments after all. Maybe they're beginnings, quiet ones that finally make sense.